hopefully there's enough geeks out there that enjoy, like, oh, that's how they do that. That's super cool. And, now I know why that guy wears a big helmet, because he's got hearing stuff on, and his helmet has to be larger to encompass, his hearing gear. Oh, that's interesting. That's what the movie's built on. It's not classical drama. It's built on feeling and seeing and understanding and discovering all these things that make this kind of warfare interesting.
Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. Today's episode takes us behind the scenes of director Aaron Schneider's new historical drama, Greyhound. The film follows a World War II Navy officer on his first wartime command assignment, defending an Allied merchant ship convoy through the Atlantic. When the convoy comes under attack by a German submarine wolf pack, the officer must battle the enemy, the elements, and his own doubts to see the mission through. In addition to Greyhound, Mr. Schneider's other directorial credits include the feature film Get Low, an episode of the series Popular, and the Academy Award-winning short film Two Soldiers. Mr. Schneider spoke with fellow director Justine Bateman about filming Greyhound in front of a virtual audience. Listen on for their spoiler-filled conversation.
Hey.
Hey, Justine.
Hey, we're on. Oscar winner, Aaron Schneider. I'm so happy we get to talk about this film.
I'm glad you're here. Thanks for doing this.
Well, just a little backstory for anyone who's listening. I watched Greyhound, get like, oh, we're locked down. Oh, there's this new film. Like, what's this major film doing on, no offense to Apple, but like on Apple, this is fantastic. And I thought, okay, well, it's a Tom Hanks in a World War II movie, and no offense to Tom Hanks, but he's done a few World War II movies, right? It takes place entirely on a boat, I think, before I watched it. And I'm like, well, we'll see. I was not prepared for it to be one of the best action films I've seen in a really long time. So for anyone who's listening, like, I immediately contacted Aaron's reps. I'm like, can you pass this email on to him, please? Like, just tell him, like, what a great job I think he did. Holy shit. So, and thankfully he emailed me back, and now we're friends. But So how did, Get Low, your first film, which was so great, it was definitely not an action film. And so do you think the producers of Greyhound had any idea they were going to get such like a finely tuned action film from you? Like, how could they have known that? How did this come about?
Well, it actually came about through enthusiasm, I think, primarily. I read the script, and you can imagine what reading the script is like. It's a lot of procedural dialogue, and you really have to look under the words for what, in this case, Tom Hanks, the screenwriter, was trying to do.
Yeah.
And I just sort of said, I get it. I can see this. And I was thinking of that scene in Close Encounters where the air traffic controller is handling this situation where one of his airplanes is seeing a UFO coming right at him. And it was, and you don't cut to the UFO, you don't cut to the pilot, the airplane. It's just all centered. All the drama hinges around this radio control operator. And there's shots of the radar screen, right?
Aaron, I thought you were going to say the mashed potato scene.
Oh, right.
In Close Encounters. Like, I see it.
Exactly.
Okay, but it's these other scenes.
No, it's the radio control guy, and he's telling the airplane what to do to avoid the UFO. And all of the drama is centered around one guy staring at a radar screen, and it's terrifying. And I thought, okay, this is a little scary because it's not conventional. We're not going to see the sub very much, if at all. And one guy, in this case, Tom Hanks, is going to be the conduit for everything the audience is supposed to feel. And, if anybody can do that, it's Tom, but it was unique. And so, but I got it. I said, I get it. I see what he's trying to do. And I sent off an effusive email about what I thought this could be to my agent. It somehow, as the story goes, went up the chain to Tom's agent, who happened to be on the phone and read him my email. And Tom said, well, yeah, cool. Why don't I sit down with him? And that's what ended up happening. I went in and we spent 2-3 hours at Playtone, his company, with Gary Getzman. And, there's Band of Brothers Emmys surrounding me in this room. And Tom and I just started talking about film and our favorite filmmakers. And I plugged him for all the DPs he'd worked with that I admired when I came up as a cinematographer. And
what was it like to work with this guy and that guy and all that?
Gordon Willis and Conrad Hall, and then he plugged me for, he's a Bill Murray fan, and Robert Duvall fan. So there were people I'd worked with he admired that he wanted to talk about, and so it was just kind of fun filmmaker talk. And when it was all over and done with, regardless of my previous film or my resume or whatnot, he basically just used his filmmaker's instinct. And it's interesting because, actually tonight, I know for a fact one of my mentors and a director I used to work with, Charlie Haight, is listening. Hello, Charlie.
Okay, Charlie.
Charlie gave me my first break as a cinematographer on a Bochco TV show. And it was the same dynamic. It was like we just started talking about how cool this could be, and said, "Hey, let's do this. Let's build a treehouse together," right? Yeah. And it was completely instinctual. And that's kind of the way it felt with Tom. It's like he didn't care that I wasn't Spielberg. He knew I was excited. He knew I had ideas, and he wanted someone to make a movie with, and it just kind of worked out that way.
Now, let's touch on that Bochco thing for a second, because that was your first cinematography job, right?
Yeah.
And you got Emmy nomination right out of the gate, and ASC awards.
Yes.
Right out of the gate, and then one not with Get Low, but your Oscar short, your first directing job, got an Oscar right out of the gate. Yeah. Did that mess with your head at all?
Well, yeah, a little bit. It sets the bar pretty high, and it did take 5 years after all that to get my first feature off the ground. And
really, what? Things take time. But it doesn't seem like you get an Oscar at a short. It seems like everybody would be like, "Oh my God, come over."
The nicest way to put it, Justine, is that it opens doors, but it does not get you through them.
Oh, right? So they're like, "Oh, we want to meet you. Now that we've met you, thank you."
But for anybody, it's hard to get a movie made, especially in the indie space.
Yeah,
and at that time, it was, the indie space was a little extra difficult. We made Get Low like 3 months after the big crash, the big 2008. Yeah. So we financed it in the middle of that mess. And then we sold it in Toronto, like in the worst year ever, where we were one of the only sales at Toronto to Sony Classics.
Yeah.
So, it was just hard because this, as we all know, this business is hard.
Yeah, it's hard to get anything made. Absolutely. All right, let's talk more about Greyhound. One of the things that really struck me was this, I got my notes. I found there to be a lot of impact shoved into moments. So I'm going to call that like an economy of detail and economy of shots for maximum effects. Like in the very first moments of the film, the newsreel voiceover and the music, really set for me, the terror of war and the importance of the convoy. Like, that's not easy to do in under a minute. That little segment, I feel like it felt like under a minute. A lot of films, I'll be 20 minutes into it going, why, what's the importance? What's the conflict? And you just boom, said it so easily like that. I mean, was that just obvious to you, or did that take some finessing to impart that so quickly in that short space there?
Well, what's the term in medias res? It was the screenplay was sort of designed to thrust you right into it. So the trick was, okay, we've got to get enough historical context into the audience so that we can throw them into this. But if we throw them into it with too little information, it's hard enough to start off with a bang. If they don't have enough basic information, they can get lost fast, especially in this environment, which is going to be new to an audience because no one's made a Navy flick for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So, so we put together, we used that sort of classic opening sequence where logos and whatnot are coming up and slowly dip them down through the clouds to give us kind of a palette to let some vintage radio kind of set the tone and let people know from the start that that we're going to throw them into danger as quickly as we can.
Well, that was really well done. I think I really said it well. And then I feel like there's that same dense economy of time and shots when that first U-boat is suspected. Like the intensity of that, I don't know. I mean, I watched it a few times now. I feel like I need to watch it like again to like get like what you were doing exactly to drive that. Like, so how are you planning and choosing the shots to create that initial tension? You know, were you just like going on instinct, or you did it in the editing room or whatever? But it was so specific. I'm just wondering how you compose that.
It's a good question because for those who haven't maybe seen the movie, the first act of the
I
film.
haven't seen the movie. Like, go see it immediately after watching this on Apple.
The first act of the film is one big, long, drawn out, tension-filled pursuit of a single U-boat, and it's a destroyer chasing a U-boat is a game of cat and mouse, and that was certainly cinematic to start with. It's like a game of cops and robbers, right? You got cops chasing the robbers. But a couple of the unique aspects of it were that, number one, I couldn't do the shot through the front windshield of the cops at the robber trying to get away, right? Because my robber was underwater.
Yeah.
So in terms of and the real art and craft of finding a U-boat and getting rid of it is about listening through sonar, determining directionality, and then kind of compensating. You're flying blind, but there's this beast underwater. And so before that, and all those things are really interesting, I think, for an audience, and can be elements of tension if the audience understands them. If you know what I mean, if they understand this is a game of cat and mouse with a mouse that's underwater. So maybe one of the first challenges is how do I convey the mouse if I can't see him?
Yeah.
And so one of the things we did is because I can't see the mouse, I've got commands coming from sonar that say it's 0-1 off the port bow or starboard, but no one's going to really process that either. So we used Tom's body language, and we came up with the idea that as the mouse scurried to the port side of the ship, Krause would transfer his body almost as if he had a sort of a physical connection with the mouse. Mm-hmm. If the mouse scurried to the left of its bow, then we'd stage him to move over to the left window, right, where he felt like he had a connection to it. And then he'd get another command, starboard 001. And even though the audience doesn't know what that means, he does. And now he shifts over to the starboard windows and looks out at the water. And, you get a rhythm going like that. And hopefully the audience suddenly kind of gets a sense that I can't see the mouse, but I can tell by what Krause, in this case, the character Krause, is doing, that he's moving back and forth, right? He's connected on a one-to-one, and so now he's a stand-in for the mouse in that sense. And then the POV, when he did look towards what he's chasing, all you see is water, but that POV is shifting to the right side of the center line of the ship when he's on the starboard, and to the left side of the center line of the ship when he's at port. So even those POVs hopefully become kind of
connected with his feelings about it, rather than we'll show you the water.
Exactly. It starts to feel like I'm using the center line of the ship to tell the audience where the sub is at any given point in the sequence. And then the other element was, which was really fun to play with, was the sonar. We all know sonar pings in submarine movies.
Yeah.
And, they're sending sound out, waiting for it to reflect off the sub and come back. And the time that transpires tells them how far away the sub is and where it's at, right? And so there's a guy sort of managing that, and there's a rhythm to that. Not only is a rhythm to that sound traveling out and back, there's a rhythm to the analog communication between the sonar guy, who then relays it to the talker, who then relays it to the captain. Then the captain responds to the talker, and the talker responds to sonar.
And did you have a sense of that rhythm, like while you were directing it, or you're just like, let me get all these pieces, and when I'm in the editing room, I know what rhythm I'm going to place? Which was it?
Good question. We shot to a radar ping, a little bit like you'd shoot a music video. You turn the ping on, and so the actor knew, it'd go ping, and it would come back, and then it would ping again. So he knew I would tell him, okay, this first reading you get, let's have it come on the second ping. And then when you get the third ping back, that's the cue to tell him, so the ping drove his dialogue, which drove the scene. But interestingly enough, I just happened to grab an insert shot of how you shoot you got 20 minutes to grab the inserts. I said, grab that button right there on the sonar button that says pulse rate, because as they got closer to the sub, the amount of time it would take,
So the frequency of the noise increases.
Yeah, you can shorten the amount of number of pings that you do because you're now closer and you can get readings faster. Yeah. And so having established that rhythm that the audience sort of connects to like a heartbeat, as they get closer and closer, it just turned out by luck and by, technical coincidence that I could have him twist that knob to a faster pulse length. And now suddenly my soundtrack, my pings, are speeding up much the same way like a composer might speed up the tempo as you get closer and closer to a kill. And then, of course, we tried, that hopefully inspires the soundtrack, the score. Yeah. And they're working together in that respect. You're trying to convey a cat and mouse game where the mouse is underwater. And then, most importantly, you've got Tom at the center of it. And he's the way into all of this for the audience. And poor Tom, every single shot in that sequence, Tom's staring out at C-stands and a white cyc, right?
And you're on a set, or you're on the ship that was docked in Baton Rouge?
We did both, but primarily for this scene, which is all close-up work inside the pilot house, that was a recreation of the pilot house, expanded in size a little bit to help us with shooting, placed on a motion base. Uh-huh. Right, and then rocked at a rhythm, which put the cameraman out of whack a little bit, gave us that sort of documentary vibe, and everybody is dealing with the same forces of gravity. So if someone grabs something, the camera is going to be doing the same thing. And even though a destroyer is sort of tied down, and you're not going to see a bunch of stuff swinging, just rocking that set for every day, put everyone in the same sort of physical sync that you need to make the audience really feel like nothing's really nailed down. There's a couple shots where the set leaked and there's a drip in front of Tom.
That is on my list.
Yeah, that was an accident.
I love that.
That was an accident.
So good.
And somebody wanted to fix that. I'm like, no, don't fix that. And there was even a scene where he was really close to the drip, and I said in the close-up version, we moved his mark so that the drip would actually hit the brim of his hat a little bit. Mm-hmm. But if you watch that drip, you'll see that it's not plumb. That's great. So real subtle. It's like that drip is at an angle because the whole set is tilting.
That is my next question about details. Okay, I'm going to list a few things here. Okay, first, this continuous background. Wait to answer until I've gone through. Okay, so the continuous background activity. So were the extras given like circa World War II combat ship command training or whatever to know what the heck they were doing? Okay, hold on. Casting. I mean, you have all these World War II faces. The runny noses. I think Tom Hanks even blows his nose at one point. The red noses for the cold. The sound, you've got the wind, you've got the sonar blips, the waves, and all analog, and then the visuals, the analog equipment, the heavily fogged binocular views, and then further fog and the clouds, and then these tall waves and the water dripping from their hats, and then the roof of the cabin. And another detail that was an emailed question was they asked, there's a lot of numerical and technical exposition things like 14 degrees south-southwest of the convoy, or we're inside the sonar reading circumference. And then they complimented you. It said, it's rare indeed to see such complexity indicated so economically and with such dramatic effect. And they wanted to know, like, were these details in the script, or were they added by the director and his team on the set, like when you're drawing on the specifically on the charts? So I know that's a lot of stuff to cover, but it all falls under these, like, there's very specific details. And again, like, one of the things I loved about it, this like really concentrated economy of shots and details, and each detail was very loaded, but it made the film so rich.
Yeah, there's no question. It's a procedural movie. It's an experiential movie. It's not, if we had any sort of thing we had to overcome in terms of expectations, it was that everyone probably assumed this was going to be Saving Private Ryan on the water. And Tom wasn't interested in that. In fact, he was interested in doing something somewhat experimental. The film starts, it never stops. It doesn't try to hit all of the classic narrative peaks and valleys in a 3-act structure. It's trying to sort of immerse you in 3 hellish days, put you right next to the captain, close enough to him that you can get to know him as a human being through the choices he makes and what's going on, behind the eyes, and hopefully, if I convey the tactical challenges, if I convey how hard it is to find one of these subs and what knobs you have to turn to do it, and how hot it is downstairs, and how kind of analog this whole process is, then it all adds up. The fact that the roof leaks, the fact that if you can't see out the window, you got to go outside and you freeze your rear end off. If you can throw all of those aspects of the experience at the screen and at the character and immerse him in it, then you're making an experiential movie. You're making a procedural, and hopefully you're thrilling people. Hopefully there's enough geeks out there that enjoy, like, oh, that's how they do that. That's super cool. And now I know why that guy wears a big helmet like they do in Spaceballs, because he's got hearing stuff on, and his helmet has to be larger to encompass his hearing gear. Oh, that's interesting. And it's sort of the I didn't know that factor. That's built into the screenplay. And Tom didn't write himself a dying scene or any monologues or any, he doesn't sit by the fire and talk about the woman he left at home or that he's frightened to die. He wrote a character that just takes on the job at hand as he's incessantly challenged, mentally and physically. And tried to do honor and justice to what made these kinds of battles interesting and heroic.
That was great. I thought it was a really tight script. Did you feel that when you first read it?
Yeah, but to your question, if that's the kind of movie you're making, the things you're talking about is the stuff you make it out of, right? That's what the movie's built on. It's not classical drama. It's built on feeling and seeing and understanding and discovering all these things that make this kind of warfare interesting and exciting. And so they just had to be there. They had to be there. You had to count on the audience's interest in the process, in the procedure.
And I like how you didn't, I never felt like, I guess some people like things explained to them. I don't. I'd rather be in an experience like you created where you just, like if you're accompanying someone to work and no one's going to stop and explain to you everything's going on, I guess if you ask questions, somebody will answer it, but you're just there experiencing all the things that they're doing. And like you said, viewers see like, oh, wow, now I understand why this helmet and stuff, but nobody explained it to them. They can just see the sense of having that kind of helmet. And and it especially drove home for me, like the types of information they had to get from all this analog equipment. And I mean, everything from you think about like the binoculars, like how well are they really working? I mean, I like how you showed like the fog of not the fog, they were fogged up. I mean, all of this. and how cold it was. I mean, I think you really did a good job of like bringing us into what they were dealing with and the temperatures they were dealing with, the equipment they were dealing with. Everything gave you this. I mean, you really felt like, oh my God, how are they gonna manage to get anything done? You know?
Yeah. No, that was where the drama was. That was the whole film. And the details and the question about the. I'll touch on the email question about the
making the marks on the charts.
Yeah, and I think the rudder commands and
they're like, was that all in the script?
That harkens back to the story I told you about picturing, the air traffic controller in Close Encounters. The reason that scene in Close Encounters is so terrifying, and everyone should go watch that again and see how unbelievably tense that is, and it's just a dude staring at a radar screen, right? Is that you're in this environment with a language and a procedure and rules and words that you don't completely understand. And it's intimidating because you don't understand it, but what you do know is something's wrong.
Yeah.
And I know enough about a radar screen to know those two dots are too close together, and so it makes the audience lean in. They're like, I don't know, I don't understand everything. I understand enough to be completely drawn in.
Yeah.
But all these other words are just making it that much more terrifying because I know these people know what they're doing, and I'm in a world I'm not completely familiar with. And so they end up feeling it more than listening to it. And
Did you wind up adding those on the set, or were all those specifics in the script already?
It was a little bit of both, because if Tom had written out all the repetitive dialogue that goes on, the script would have been like 300 pages long.
Do you have like an advisor, like a World War II advisor giving you all those?
So to answer the other question about were they, the faces and the way they were trained, Dale Dye, who worked with Steven Spielberg and Tom on Saving Private Ryan, and created his famous boot camp where the actors sort of. We put all the actors on the ship, on the USS Kidd, the museum ship that we used as a match set to our stage set, and metal bunks and no heat, the whole. And Dale Dye kept them on board and ran them through drills for like 4 or 5 days in a row, and fed them in the mess room, and people banged their heads on bulkheads and learned how to move on steel decks and how to climb the ladders, and they learned how to do a military funeral, which we recreated in the film, and they learned how the procedure of bridge operations.
Yeah,
they just ran little drills where they would run information down to the bottom of the ship and back up, so that so if the helmsman was given an order to turn to hard right rudder, he would repeat the command, and then he would say he's achieved his bearing, and all that sort of training was done beforehand, so that Tom's dialogue, which is what drove the script, Tom's dialogue would then trigger this environment of military personnel to say and behave the way they would in a real situation, so that all that dialogue didn't have to live in the script, but Tom's through line, his dialogue, his experience would then trigger it. And then Tom, of course, was well versed in it as well. So he would soon find himself being on the bridge of a destroyer. And it just so happens that the lines he's giving them are from the script instead of, actually sailing the vessel.
What about the casting? I mean, was it easy or hard to find 1940s faces?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Some people have period film faces and some people don't. And it's really hard to put your finger on what the difference is, but you kind of know it when you see it. But I worked with one of the producers at Playtone, Steve Shareshian, who has been a part of all of those Playtone productions like Band of Brothers and Pacific.
Yeah.
And we basically got a bunch of tapes and headshots. And the film's broken down into watches, 4-hour watch lengths. And every 4 hours, a whole new crew leaves and a whole new crew comes in. And those title cards in the film are the
watches.
Are the cues for those watch changes. So every time one of those cards comes, a new set of faces appear on the bridge. And so we put up the watches on the board that represented, a 24-hour period. And we just started moving faces around and looking at tapes and saying, if the talker is a little short, you have to key off something, right? So if the opening scene with the big, long, extended sub chase, there's like a real tall, lanky helmsman at the wheel, and there's a tiny little squeaky guy at the lee helm, right? So if it's like it was just something sort of interesting about throwing this tall, lanky guy up against this little mousy guy, and I knew in the 2-shot that I don't know there. All I'm going to hear him say is commands, but if I look at them, do they feel like do they feel like two guys that joke around with each other in the mess hall? Do they feel like they're
make you think about their relationship?
So you can put faces next to each other and say, that guy, like the same thing applied to, there's that scene in the beginning where Tom Hanks as Krause sort of disciplines two guys who got in a fight.
Right, exactly.
And they're led in front of the captain. And when they walked in and stopped with their cut lips and their bruised eyes, I wanted to know, I'm like, I know exactly who those guys are and why, they hate each other. So you're putting...
I know why they hate each other. That's really funny.
That guy started it. You can just tell, right? So you're trying to build little stories out of faces like that.
Well done on that. Speaking of, so I want to talk about a couple of the emotional moments and have you talk about that. So Cleveland's death, the chef. This is, what's the actor's name? Rob Moore?
Rob Morgan.
Rob Morgan.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Terrific actor.
What a great actor. Okay, so his death made me cry both times I watched the film. And I love the way that this was revealed I love the spine of his trying to feed the is it the captain or the commander? Captain? Both. He's both, okay. So him trying to feed the captain and then having a new head chef show up, I thought that was such a great way to show that. And then the other moment was the burying the dead at sea, and I got the sense it was like internally for them, it was like, we'll feel this later. We can't feel this now because we have to work, but we'll feel this later, these feelings. And I felt like these emotional moments, they pay off. It's not like these are moments where nobody's crying or yelling or anything like this, but I feel like they paid off so deeply because you had, as a result of the investments you made in the prior scenes, you built a chain up to that moment so that in that moment, all it needs to be is a new guy shows up with a tray. What's the big deal? Right. But you see that you're like, oh my God, oh no, and I'm crying. So I wanted to ask you, how did you assemble the design of the emotional investments leading up to the payoffs of those two scenes specifically?
It's an interesting question, and it was scary for me. My first feature was really built on classic, drama, human relationships, complex histories,
right?
Classic drama. And Greyhound never pretended to be heavily constructed dramatically. It's got Tom.
Well, that's funny because it has some of the best dramatic moments of all the screeners I've seen this year. So it's funny that you say that.
Well, what I mean by that is it's not leaning very hard on it. It's not written in there. And it shouldn't be surprising that the screenwriter, being an actor, is relying on the footprint of the actor in the film and what they do with it to create the world. And yes, on paper, all Rob Morgan is doing through the first part of the film before the funeral is delivering food to the captain.
Yeah.
Offering him coffee or to make a sandwich, right? But an actor like Rob Morgan gets in there, and an actor like Tom Hanks, and suddenly in the opening scene, Tom bows his head to give thanks for the food. And you see Cleveland, the character Rob Morgan plays, bow his head, and he says, "Amen," right? And you immediately go, those are two men of faith. And they seem pretty friendly with each other. I'll bet there's something there, right?
Yeah,
There's another version of that scene where he's just an extra, pouring him coffee. But the actors are building a relationship out of just these little pieces that Tom has written into the...
Yeah. Or even he has a tiny line later where he says, the captain hasn't eaten yet today. He needs to eat. Like like one tiny line. You're like, oh my God, this guy really, who's watching out for the captain? Like everyone's like watching the captain for instructions, but who's watching out for the captain's well-being? And it's this guy. And
there was something really beautiful about this. People point out, and rightly so, that he's essentially a servant. He's a waiter. He's a butler. But there was actually, and it's true that World War II Navy was segregated in this respect. If they weren't at black sailors did spit lead with the best of them during general quarters. They got on guns and they fought just like everyone else. But the jobs that were relegated to them in a segregated Navy were confined to the mess duties. However, there's a real beauty in serving someone. This guy is serving his captain in the only way he can, and he's taking care of his captain.
Taking care of him. That's what I mean. Like he's really caring for him. And
then when you add to that, just how much beauty there is in the concept of nourishing someone in general. We can't live without food, and so there was this really, even though you can look at it as if it was an outgrowth of segregation, there's also something really beautiful about the relationship between a guy who's keeping his captain fed and the captain, and that's what the script was trying to explore, and it did it in little tiny pieces that are very, and so that you hope when you finally cut to his body being dropped into the water, that these actors and the screenplay and you have given the audience enough to feel what you need to feel for that, right? And it's not trying to do something huge. It's just trying to make you feel something and bring these characters to life.
I feel like too many actors, writers, and directors try to jam it into that moment, that particular scene, instead of laying it out beforehand. I especially find it true in comedy. It's like if you have laid stuff in comedy and the audience knows who these characters are, then they just have to have there could be a moment where they just have a look and the audience will just burst out laughing, even though nothing's happened, because they're like, I know what she's thinking right now, or I know what he's about to say, right. And in the same way in drama, sometimes, if you load it up properly, like if it's in a romantic scene and a man just touches the back of a woman's, hair or something, you can be like, oh my God, like it can just seem like the most romantic thing that's ever happened because you've loaded it up instead of thinking, oh, now we've got to have this, they hit the wall and rip each other's clothes off. And I don't know, that doesn't really get me going when I watch it. But if you load something up, it's going to be cool.
Tom's taste and mine are aligned in that respect. And as we were developing the screenplay a little bit before we started shooting, I would sometimes lean a little harder on some of this stuff, and Tom would go, no.
And not have it these subtle, breadcrumbs.
And the way he put it, he'd always say, let's not put a hat on a hat. Right? That was his favorite phrase. And that's my taste too. And we were a good sort of balancing act for each other, I think, in that.
Perfect. Okay, let's talk about VFX.
Okay.
Because I had no idea when I was watching this it made sense to me after. I'm like, oh, okay, of course. But I had no idea there was no water. right? There's no practical water. Do I have that right?
We fooled you, yeah. Or at least we fooled you most of the time.
100% CGI water. You had the USS Kidd that's docked in Baton Rouge. You've got your set that's on a gimbal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had heard that the VFX team shot the skies around the UK in winter for the sky plates and
stuff
like that. Okay. Now, Tim Miller's a friend of mine who did Deadpool, and he's done a lot of VFX and animation and all this. So when he did his first film, he knew what he needed to shoot in order to accommodate all of that.
Right.
So you tell me, like, you've done, your Academy Award winning short, and then you do Get Low, which is, terrific, but no VFX that are apparent. How did you grab hold of, like, knowing what you needed to shoot and not shoot, considering the massive amount of VFX that are going to be around the boat? Like, how did you bring that together?
Well, I made sure when I went in to meet Tom's partner, Gary Getzman, when I first wanted to get into film, I was a ILM fan, reading Cinefex. So my way into the movie business was through old Cinefex magazines and wanting to go to work for ILM.
Okay.
And then I got into film school, and the first thing they tell you is it's all going to be computerized in the future. And you're like, oh man, I just got out of 2 years of engineering. I don't want to deal with computers. I want to like build movies.
What was your engineering background? Was it software or hardware?
I was 2 years into mechanical engineering before transferring to film school at USC.
Okay.
And so I looked around, and cinematography was there in the wings, which is, the ultimate sort of, if the director's the architect, you get to be the construction guy, right?
Yeah.
And so I gravitated to that, and then moved to directing, did my short. That was the transition for that. And then my first feature was this sort of folk tale-ish period drama. But the truth is, I'd come into this whole world as a fan of visual effects. And in fact, over the past 10 to 12 years, ironically, happened upon this software that everyone, the standard software used in visual effects now, and started self-teaching myself how to compose.
What's it called, Aaron?
Well, there's Maya, there's Nuke, there's all different facets, within visual effects that require different softwares. But a lot of previs is done with a software called Autodesk Maya. And I sort of just geeked out on that for years. Some people were binging, Netflix, and I was binging, visual effects tutorials. And so I was able to put together a little previs and to, as a kind of a talking point for Tom and Gary when I went in the second time. And part of it was to try to acquaint them with the fact that they'd invested themselves in someone who was going to be able to handle the visual effects of this.
Like, little did they know, right?
Yeah, and we actually put together. We didn't use like a third floor or anything. We put together our own four-walled previs team. We rented computers. We found artists. We put together our own room and our database and our workflow. And I even went to work on. I had this idea. I thought I have to find a way of recreating the sense of open ocean photography as if we were out there shooting this on the ocean. But I got to find a way to make. I'm going to be in a digital world for this, but I got to find a way of making it feel authentic and grounded in reality. And so I went to work. I found a game engine plugin that simulates water waves, and you can type in the Beaufort scale and the mass of your ships, and it'll float ship in a physically realistic way, right? And so even before we started filming, I was like, how can I get realism in my visual effects? And I put a camera on one of the boats. So by recreating...
Hey, Aaron, did that inform how you set the motion of the gimbal?
Absolutely.
Nice.
In fact, I was able to measure... I'll tell you, if you want to really geek out. So I'm floating both of these boats, right? Uh-huh. And I'm putting a camera on one, so I'm now approximating what it looks like for some poor cameraman to try and keep another boat in frame while they're out in the Atlantic in a Beaufort 7 ocean, right?
Yeah.
And so that grounds the shot. Even before the artists try to create realism in their imagery, I've given them a shot that's grounded in the way it's really done in the real world, right? It's not a helicopter circling or going through portals and out the other side. It feels like you're out there. At any rate, so I came up with this sort of system that allowed our previs to feel like it was like all those Navy, films online from the 40s where the ship next to them was shooting the ship next to them, but in a digital environment. And that became the foundation of the...
What a great collection of information you had for the visual effects people, huh?
But to answer your question about, did it affect the way we rocked our set?
Yeah.
You could then go into the software and isolate this camera on two ships, and you could measure how much vertical displacement was going on as each ship sort of sailed next to each other. You could measure that, and then you could, when we went out to the Kid, the museum ship that's moored, steadily on the river, now you do your classic up and down motion, right? To make it look like that ship in dry dock is sailing. But we actually took a super techno crane and on 6-second intervals swung a super techno crane up and down 40 feet. It took like 5 guys, and they worked their asses off. Because I knew from the math and some of that digital play that if I was on a ship in the ocean, that's how much offset would be occurring in the real world.
My God, if you hadn't done all that math.
So, but
you prepped it properly for everybody.
I probably had way too much time on my hands, in pre-production. And and when there's nothing else to do, I tend to geek out pretty heavily. So,
well, we all benefited from it for sure. And then I was gonna ask you about Two Soldiers and did earning an Oscar right out of the gate mess with your head, but we already did that. I just think that's incredible. I mean, had you you'd done a lot of cinematography work, on music videos and big films, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to do a short. I mean, was it your very first directing job?
The short?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the first thing I wrote and directed. But
how did that feel when they're like, you're going to be nominated, you're on the short list, you're going to be nominated for an Oscar? Were you like, wait, what?
Yeah, I was.
Or were you like, I don't blame them because this is a masterpiece? Which was it?
Well, ideally, it's a mixture of both, right? You're both humbled and proud of yourself because, these things aren't easy to do. And I actually put, it didn't come without sacrifice. I put, that chunk of money you make by the time you're in your young 30s, I put it in the bank and spent it on a movie. So I was, I took myself down to, paycheck to paycheck lifestyle just to make that movie.
Yeah.
And, because in this business, you have to really make a big splash to make any change happen in your career. And I just knew that if I could find a beautiful story and shoot it in the most bold and way I could, that I'd have a shot at, a career in this business is like the asteroid. It takes how the asteroid, you have to blow up an atom bomb on the asteroid to like make it go 1 degree off course, right? Miss Earth.
Yeah. Right.
Careers in this business are a lot like...
I saw that movie.
Exactly. Careers in this business are a lot like asteroids. If you want it to go in a different direction, you got to set off an atom bomb, or you're just going to just keep plowing straight ahead.
Well, you definitely you blew up the asteroid
instead
of just altering the course, right? You're like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make a big splash, and then boom, Oscar nomination. Boom, Oscar win. That's amazing.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun. But you're also you're also struck with the feeling, the sinking feeling that this might be it. This might be.
Yeah. Was that it?
This is like, theoretically, if I want a third act that's more spectacular than this first act, I've got a lot of, you got a lot of work cut out for you, right? Mm-hmm. So you may have to settle for a first act climax in your life. But, the fun's in the process, right?
Well, I'm like really looking forward to all the rest of the stuff you're going to do, because, if those 3 projects, the short and Get Low and this, are any indication, like, it's just going to get more and more spectacular. So I look forward to, all the rest of your work. Aaron, thank you so much for having me moderate this. You know how much I love this film and how much I love the work that you did in this. As a director that's not done as much as you've done, I can still recognize how very much your contribution to this film, again, great script, great acting, all of this, but as a director, I know, like, it could very easily not have been the really compelling, engaging action film, emotionally devastating film. And I mean, like, those 2 moments I told you I like so much, in someone else's hands, I don't know that those things would have been in there. So you did a phenomenal job, and I hope everyone goes and sees Greyhound on Apple. It's really great job. Great job.
Thank you. I had a lot of help. I had a terrific crew and a lot of help, and the support of Tom and Playtone, who have, as we all know, done this World War II thing a couple of times
right.
before. I was just honored to be a part of that legacy. When you get handed the torch, by the guy, from Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers, and they go, run that up the field a little bit.
You don't want to be the one to break the chain of the World War
II. That is a ball you do not want to drop.
Right.
So I had a lot of help, and thank you. By the way, you said up front, I think you said how we came to meet each other. I got an email out of nowhere,
right.
And I wanted to say thank you for that, because it might not even be as common as you think it is that we as directors and reach out to our peers with these kinds of little pieces of encouragement, and it really meant a lot to me. And so I would like to use this opportunity with the DJ members out there listening, that this is one of the cool things about being a director, is being able to share your work with other directors and hear from them. So everybody out there, if you see something you like, do what Justine did and send them a little note, because it'll make their day.
Just go to IMDb and look up who their reps are and just send them an email saying, can you pass this on to Aaron Schneider for me, or whatever. And if they do, they do. If they don't, they don't. And if they do, I've found personally 50% of the time, not that that's why I'm sending it, but, I'll get a response too, like say, oh, thanks, and the other 50% of the time, I don't care. I'm just glad they got it, that they know somebody noticed.
And you may make a new friend.
You might make a new friend.
Yeah.
Like you.
All
I
right.
love it. All right. Well, that's our time. And thanks, DGA, for being the cool union that you are, and for putting all this together.
Thank you, DJ. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. If you'd like to hear more, The Director's Cut is available wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay tuned in the coming weeks as we bring you discussions of films from Gabriella Calperthwaite, Josh Greenbaum, and Nisha Ganatra. And be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow film buffs find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.